Last fall, I pulled 42 pounds of dried beans off a single 12-foot row in my homestead garden. That's enough shelf-stable protein to feed my wife and me through most of the winter, and it came from a patch of ground smaller than a parking space. For 20-some years before that, I was lucky to scrape 8 or 10 pounds of dry beans out of 3 times that much garden, and I burned through bags of fertilizer trying to make it happen. What changed wasn't the seed. It wasn't the weather. It was watching how my Amish neighbor Eli plants his beans in the spring out near Lancaster County. The first time I walked his bean rows in late August, I just stood there counting pods. He had 4 times what I had on the same square footage, and he hadn't touched a bag of synthetic anything. Today, I'm going to walk you through exactly how Eli plants beans, why it triples the protein harvest off the same plot of ground, and how to set it up in your own garden this season. And stay with me to the end, because there's one small thing Eli does the night before he plants that I've never seen written down in any seed catalog or homestead book. And it's the reason his germination rates run almost perfect every single year. Now, let me be straight with you. I was the guy who planted bush beans in single rows, watered them when I remembered, and hoped for the best. I'd pick a few quarts of green beans for the freezer and call it a successful bean year. The idea of growing real protein, the kind of dry shell beans that fill mason jars and feed a family through February, never even crossed my mind. I figured that's what farmers did, not homesteaders with a backyard plot. If that's where you are right now, I was right there with you for 3 decades. The mistake I was making wasn't about effort. It was about thinking of beans as a side dish instead of a staple. Eli reset that for me the first time he opened his pantry and showed me 20-quart jars of dried beans lined up like canned goods. That was one season's harvest from a garden smaller than mine. Here's what I learned from my Amish neighbors that changed everything. There's a guiding idea in their communities called Gelassenheit, which roughly means yielding to the natural order, working with how things were designed to grow rather than forcing them. Now, in the Amish world, this isn't romantic. It's practical. When you've got 8 or 10 kids around the table and limited acreage, you can't afford to fight nature. You have to partner with it. For beans, that partnership is built right into the plant. Beans pull nitrogen out of the air and fix it into the soil through their roots. They want to climb. They want to be planted dense. The Amish figured out generations ago that if you give beans exactly what they're built to do, they'll feed you in volumes most modern gardeners never even imagined. Here's how Eli sets it up. The first thing to understand is that not every bean is a protein bean. If you're growing for a few summer dinners of green beans, that's one thing. But if you're growing for serious food security, you want dry shell beans. These are the beans you let mature on the vine until the pods rattle, then shell out and store dry for the winter. Pound for pound, dried beans deliver about 22 grams of protein per cup of cooked bean, and they keep for years on a shelf. Eli plants 3 varieties every season, and these are the ones I now plant too. The first is True Red Cranberry, an heirloom Pennsylvania Dutch variety with thick, meaty bean. The second is Jacob's Cattle, a kidney-shaped bean that produces heavily on a pole. The third is a half-runner like Mountaineer, or Greasy Grits, which gives you both green beans early and dry beans late if you let part of the row mature. Avoid generic bush beans from a big box store if protein is your goal. They're bred for a single quick harvest, not for the dense late season pod set you need. Now let me show you exactly how to prepare the ground, because this is where most of us go wrong. Beans are nitrogen fixers, but they still need a rich, well-structured soil to produce heavily. Eli works 2 to 3 inches of well-aged horse manure compost into the top 6 to 8 inches of soil about 3 weeks before planting. If you don't have access to aged manure, a deep layer of finished compost works fine. Skip fresh manure entirely. It will burn your seedlings. Here's the part most folks miss. Beans need a specific soil bacteria called rhizobium to actually fix nitrogen in their roots. Most native soils have some, but if you've never grown legumes in that bed, the population is low. Buy a small bag of garden bean inoculant from any seed supplier. It costs about $5 and lasts several seasons. The night before planting, dampen your seeds and roll them in the powder until they're coated black. This single step alone increased my pod set by roughly 30% the first year I tried it. Now, here's where the yield multiplication really happens, and it's the part that surprised me most when I first saw Eli's garden. He grows almost all his beans vertically. Not bush beans sprawling on the ground, but pole beans climbing 8 to 10 feet straight up. The reason is simple math. A bush bean produces in a single layer. A pole bean produces all the way up the vine, top to bottom, for weeks longer than any bush variety. Eli builds what he calls a bean fence. It's 2 posts driven 4 feet apart at each end of the row, with a horizontal top rail at 7 feet and jute twine dropped vertically every 6 inches between the top rail and a bottom rail at ground level. A 12-foot row of this gives you roughly 24 climbing string, and that's where you get the multiplication. You're harvesting from a vertical column, not a horizontal patch. Plant your inoculated seeds 2 inches deep, 2 seeds per string, and thin to the strongest seedling once they're up. Space your rows 3 feet apart so you have room to walk between them and pick. If you're in zones 3 through 5, wait until soil temperature is at least 60 degrees Fahrenheit, usually about a week after your last frost. In zones 7 through 9, you can plant earlier and even put in a second succession in mid-July for a fall harvest. Now, what I have shared with you today is a real piece of the puzzle, but it is still just one piece. If you are tired of fighting the same battles every season, if you want a garden that actually works with you instead of against you, then I would really encourage you to check out the guide I put together. It is called the 30-Day Amish Self-Sufficient Garden Protocol. And it is everything I have learned from my Amish neighbors over the last 3 decades, organized into a simple, day-by-day plan you can start this season. It covers the full 5 defense layers to build a garden that defends itself from the soil up. It has got the complete 4-bed crop rotation system that stops disease and pests before they ever get a foothold. And it includes the companion planting field guide, so you know exactly what to grow next to what and why. So click the link in the description right below this video. Just scroll down a little and you will see it. Or alternatively, if you are watching on a television or a computer screen, you can take out your phone, open up your camera like you are going to take a picture, and hold it up to the QR code you see on screen right now. A little link will pop up at the top of your phone screen. Just tap that, and it will bring you right to the guide. No typing, no searching. Either way works. I think it is the best investment you can make in your garden this year. The next thing Eli does is interplant his beans with a row of sunflowers and dill running along one side of the bean fence, about 18 inches off the row. The sunflowers add a second vertical layer that pulls in pollinators, and the dill flowers attract parasitic wasps that handle the bean beetles before they ever become a problem. I lost half my bean crop to Mexican bean beetles back in 2015. Since I started planting dill alongside, I've had maybe a handful of beetles each season, and the wasps clean them up. Here's the part most homesteaders skip, and it costs them dearly. You have to harvest dry beans at the right moment. Not too early, not too late. Eli walks his bean fence every few days starting in late August. The pods are ready when they've turned tan or papery, and you can hear the beans rattle when you shake them. If you pick too early, the beans won't store. If you wait too long through wet weather, the pods will mold or split open and drop on the ground. Pick the dry pods into a bushel basket and let them finish drying for another week or 2 on a tarp in a dry barn or covered porch. Then shell them out, which the Amish often do as a family activity in the evening. 1 bushel of dry pods will yield roughly 6 to 8 pounds of shelled beans. Store them in glass jars with a tight lid in a cool, dark pantry, and they'll keep for 2 to 3 years easily. That's real protein on the shelf. let me share some patterns I see all the time. Things I did myself for years before Eli set me straight. No judgment here. I made every one of these mistakes. The first pattern is planting bush beans for the freezer and stopping there. Bush beans are fine for fresh eating, but they're not how you build year-round protein. Pole beans for drying are 5 times more productive in the same square footage, and they store for years without electricity. The second pattern is skipping the inoculant. Most folks have never even heard of it. They figure beans fix nitrogen automatically, so why bother? The truth is, the bacteria has to actually be present in the soil for that fixation to happen, and a $5 bag changes the entire harvest. The third pattern is planting in single bush rows. A row of beans on the ground is 1 layer of production. The Amish bean fence gives you 8 feet of vertical production off the same footprint. Same water, same soil, same labor, 4 times the harvest. The fourth pattern is harvesting at the green bean stage and missing the protein crop entirely. If you let half your row mature into dry beans, instead of picking everything green, you'll end up with both summer eating and winter storage from the same planting. Now here's the technique I promised you at the beginning. The one Eli does the night before he plants that I've never seen written down. After he coats his seeds in inoculant, he wraps them in a damp piece of burlap and sets them in a warm spot near the wood stove or on top of the refrigerator overnight. By morning, the seeds have just barely begun to swell, with the tiniest white root tips starting to peek out on the strongest seed. He plants those pre-swelled seeds the next morning into warm, moist soil. The germination rate runs near 95% every single year, and the seedlings break ground 3 to 4 days faster than dry planted seeds. Faster germination means less time for soil pests and rot to take a seed out of play, and a thicker, more uniform stand of plants. I started doing this 2 seasons ago, and I went from replanting gaps every spring to having full, even rows on the first try. Now, if everything I have shared today resonates with you and you want to take this further than one video can take you, I would really encourage you to check out the guide I put together. It is called the 30-Day Amish Self-Sufficient Garden Protocol, and it is everything I have learned from my Amish neighbors over the last 3 decades, organized into a simple day-by-day plan you can start this season. It covers the full 5 defense layers to build a garden that defends itself from the soil up. It has got the complete 4-bed crop rotation system that stops disease and pests before they ever get a foothold. And it includes the companion planting field guide, so you know exactly what to grow next to what and why. Now, there are 2 easy ways to grab it. The first way is to click the link in the description right below this video. Just scroll down a little and you will see it. The second way, if you are watching on a television or a computer screen, is to take out your phone, open up your camera like you are going to take a picture, and hold it up to the QR code you see on screen right now. A little link will pop up at the top of your phone screen. Just tap that and it will bring you right to the guide. No typing, no searching, either way works. I think it is the best investment you can make in your garden this year. 40 years of learning from Amish neighbors organized into one practical system you can start using this week. So that's how Eli plants his bean, and how I went from 10 pounds of dry beans a year to over 40 off less ground. Try the bean fence this spring, inoculate your seeds, and let me know in the comments how your harvest comes in. Thanks for spending some time with me today. I'll see you in the next one. E.